My grandfather used to tell me success is like a glacier. What people see above the surface is just a sliver of what's holding it up. As a kid, I thought he was just being poetic. It wasn't until much later that I truly understood what he meant. Now looking back, I realize I didn't just become successful. I became that glacier, steady and underestimated until the day everything hidden beneath finally surfaced. My name is Leah Morgan, and this is the story of how I went from being the quiet embarrassment in my sister's picture-perfect world to watching her carefully constructed image shatter in one breathtaking evening. I grew up in a cramped apartment above Morgan's Hearth, our family's small bakery, tucked into the heart of Jacksonville's old Riverside district. From as early as I can remember, I knew what hard work tasted like flour in my hair sugar under my nails and the scent of cinnamon clinging to my clothes. By the time I was 9, I could fold pastry boxes in my sleep and greet every regular by name. At 13, I was already balancing ledgers and catching mistakes in supplier invoices that even my uncle who handled the books didn't notice. Numbers my grandfather would call out from behind the counter, his hands dusted with powdered sugar, waving a sticky yellow notepad in my direction. I'd drop whatever I was doing and skip over heart racing, with the thrill of solving a new problem. We're spending too much on strawberry compote, I'd say, pointing to the figures. But if we share a bulk order with that diner 2 blocks down, we'll save almost 18%. He'd chuckle, tapping me on the forehead with the back of a flour-coated spoon. Business brain on a kid's shoulders, he'd say with pride. You're gonna build something big, Leah. While other kids spent their weekends at the park or glued to video games, I was reading up on inventory cycles and lean operating models. That was my playground. My parents, Rose and Henry Morgan, worked sunup to way past sundown, all to afford the tuition for my scholarship spot at NYU. I carried that weight with me every day, not just the pressure to get good grades, but the need to honor the sacrifices they made. I owed them more than a diploma. By the time I was 23, I'd launched a data-driven microloan platform, Morgan Ridge Ventures, that gained traction in immigrant communities. The idea was simple: create access to capital for people like my parents, people who just needed a foot in the door. By 28, it was a multi-million-dollar enterprise. But I never sought the limelight. I stayed quiet, let the results speak. That's when I met David Carter. It happened at this quirky secondhand bookstore tucked off a side street near Five Points. I was in yoga pants and a faded college hoodie, scrolling through investment articles on my tablet while sipping lukewarm coffee. David knocked over an entire stack of philosophy books with one wrong elbow swing. Whoa, sorry, he said, crouching to gather them with a sheepish grin. No worries, I said, laughing as I knelt to help. I'm Leah Morgan. Let me buy you a coffee to make up for the book landslide. That casual offer led to an impromptu lunch, which turned into more dates, and then surprisingly quickly everything else. David wasn't in finance. He was a public school civics teacher, grounded, passionate, with a soft spot for community service, and a bookshelf overflowing with biographies. He didn't care about IPOs or market caps. He cared about people. And when he proposed, 6 months later, I didn't hesitate. I said yes. My family was overjoyed, well, almost all of them. My older sister Carla and I had always been cut from different cloth. She went the conventional route: business school, power suits, boardrooms, and hustle. She carved out a name for herself as the marketing director at Whitestone and Beck, one of the top investment firms in the Southeast. Prestige was her fuel, and she made it clear that while she loved me in a sisterly sense, she didn't quite see me as an equal. At a family dinner at our parents' place in San Marco, she twirled her glass of wine like a judge at a tasting. So, still juggling pastries and that little app of yours, she asked, feigning polite interest. I could have told her that little app had just landed a long-term deal with a major private equity firm, but I didn't. Maybe part of me still relished the quiet power of being underestimated. I'm still involved in both, I said, taking a sip of my coffee. Well, someone's got to keep the muffins warm, she quipped with a sly smile. A lot of folks don't realize Leah's managing more than muffins, my cousin Alma offered kindly. Carla just landed a huge campaign at Whitestone and Beck. The CEO personally thanked her. What they didn't know, Whitestone and Beck had been using data tools developed by my company for over a year. In fact, we were deep in acquisition talks. That's great, I said, and I meant it. Carla assumed she'd won some invisible contest. Months passed. Family events came and went. Carla's passive-aggressive digs became routine, and David kept nudging me to rise above it. Then came the big announcement: Carla was hosting a gala to celebrate her promotion to senior director. At the planning dinner, she turned to me with a sharp-edged smile. Leah, You've got experience with events and food coordination. Would you mind managing the catering staff? Mom clapped. That's a perfect fit. Leah runs her own business. She knows logistics. I met Carla's smug gaze, calm and smiling. Of course, I'd be happy to help. That night, David pulled me aside, his face tense. You don't have to do this. We can say you're sick. Or something came up with work. But my mind was already moving. No, I said softly. I want to. It's a big night for Carla. Everything should be perfect. What no one at that table knew was that just that morning, I'd received an email from James Whitestone, the CEO of Carla's company. He wanted to finally meet the elusive founder of Morgan Ridge Ventures. He was attending the gala. And just like that, everything began falling into place. For the first time in years, I didn't smile just to be polite. I smiled because I was ready for the reveal. Carla Morgan had no inkling that the glittering evening she had orchestrated with such precision was about to become far more than a self-congratulatory toast to her latest promotion. She was the architect of the night's glamour, its candlelit opulence and self-assured pageantry, but not of its climax. Because sometimes revenge doesn't arrive with fire and fury, but rather with a slow rising tide of truth. And that night, truth was preparing its grand ascent. The Whitestone estate had been transformed into something caught between the sterile elegance of a high-end showroom and the aesthetic ambition of a Pinterest wedding board. One of Carla's colleagues had described the event as classy and elevated, though I thought it looked more like a photo shoot backdrop for hedge fund royalty. Every surface gleamed. Delicate crystal stemware shimmered beneath chandeliers and ice sculptures absurdly opulent in the humid Florida evening, sweated silently by the walls, like nervous guests. A harpist plucked ambient melodies near the garden's fountain, the notes floating upward into a sky the color of ripe plums. I couldn't help but wonder as I glanced at the gilded menus and floral arrangements that looked like they'd been airlifted from a Manhattan hotel ballroom, whether Carla's event budget had eclipsed her actual bonus. She emerged then, sweeping into the courtyard like a monarch arriving to review her court. Her silk gown glistened like a second skin under the lights, her posture impeccable, her smile honed to a diamond edge. Leah, she called, her voice carrying like a cue to a stagehand, the catering staff is waiting. Try to keep them in order, and please. Her eyes flicked dismissively over my simple black dress, stay out of the spotlight. I inclined my head with feigned subservience, my voice smooth and unshaken. Of course, Carla. I'll make sure everything runs like clockwork. Beside me, David placed a gentle hand on my forearm. We can leave, he murmured, voice low, strained with worry. Say the word. I looked at him and smiled, not out of kindness or reassurance, but because everything was unfolding exactly as I had anticipated. No need, I said softly. Everything is precisely on track. Inside the sprawling kitchen, tension clung to the air like steam. The catering crew, mostly young and clearly flustered, scrambled to fulfill a flurry of last-minute demands. Carla, unsurprisingly, had decided to change several menu items just hours before the event. A timid girl with a notepad approached me. Miss Morgan? She asked nervously. Your sister wants champagne passed out at exactly 8:15 just before her speech, but she also wants continued tray service, and we're down 2 servers. I offered a calm, confident smile, the kind you learn in hot kitchens and deadline-driven chaos. It's all right. I've handled more disorganized Friday nights at the bakery with a busted AC and a staff of 3. We'll make it work. If you've ever been overlooked, talked down to, or underestimated by someone who should have known better, stay with me. Because what happened next didn't just change a room, it cracked open a world. And if you believe in the strength of silent ambition, in the voice of quiet confidence rising at just the right moment, then you'll want to keep reading. For the next hour, I became part of the machinery. Shoulder to shoulder with the catering team, I coordinated timing down to the minute inspected plating with a chef's eye and ensured that not a single flute of champagne missed its mark. Yet, all the while, I observed. Guests trickled in, each one carefully catalogued in my mind, names, affiliations, titles. Carla glided through the crowd, laughter flowing too freely, sipping too much Prosecco as she basked in the spotlight like a cat in the sun. At one point, I heard her tittering with a group of executives. Did you see Leah? She giggled. She's helping with catering. Honestly, it's where she feels most at home. Poor thing. A few tight rehearsed laughs followed. One man glanced in my direction, eyes narrowing. Carla leaned in, conspiratorially adding with mock gravity, "Some people just aren't built for this world." My mother Rose, ever the gracious accomplice to Carla's pageantry, chimed in sweetly. "We've always tried to include her. It's what family does, of course. But with her background, well, we do what we can." I moved through them like a shadow tray in hand, silent and composed. At precisely 7:55 p.m., my phone vibrated. A single text from my CFO, all signed. "We're greenlit." Right on schedule. Carla, now buoyed by champagne and shallow praise, leaned into another group. When David first introduced me to his girlfriend, my sister, I thought he was joking. She laughed. "A baker with a startup, but my mother says charity begins at home," Rose added with a chuckle. "We're thinking of helping her with a small condo. Nothing too close to San Marco, but something she can manage." And then it happened. A hush, almost imperceptible at first, swept across the patio. Heads turned. Conversation ebbed. The harpist's notes stumbled and stopped. And there he was, James Whitestone, CEO of Whitestone and Beck, entering, like a man accustomed to controlling rooms just by walking into them. Carla nearly tripped in her heels, rushing to meet him. "Mr. Whitestone, we're honored to have you," she gushed, offering both hands. He nodded politely, but his gaze wandered past her, past the crowd, until it landed on me. His brow furrowed, curiosity flashing in his eyes. Carla, noticing, attempted to redirect. "Oh, don't mind her. That's just my sister Leah helping with service tonight. Let me show you the marketing portfolio." "Actually," James interrupted, not looking away. "Isn't that—" I handed my tray to a server and stepped forward. "Lo, Leah, please," Carla hissed, barely audible. "He doesn't need a drink. Just go back to the kitchen where—" "Hello, James," I said calmly, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." Recognition bloomed fully in his face. "Mrs. Morgan," he said, beaming, "I didn't expect to see you. Serving drinks at your own celebration." Carla's face twisted, her voice high and brittle. "I what?" James smiled, ever so slightly amused. "Given that Morgan Ridge Ventures just acquired a controlling interest in Whitestone and Beck, I assumed this gala was meant to announce the merger." The room froze. Even the ice cubes dared not shift in their glasses. The clink of a shattered flute cut the silence, Carla's glass slipping from her trembling hand and exploding across the marble floor. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. "Leah, she's just a baker. She runs that little shop in Old Riverside." James chuckled, not unkindly. "Mrs. Morgan is the founder and CEO of Morgan Ridge Ventures. As of 10 minutes ago, she owns 51% of Whitestone and Beck, your department included." He turned to me again, this time with genuine admiration. "Those optimization models your team delivered? Brilliant. Our tech division hasn't stopped singing your praises." Across the courtyard, Rose steadied herself against a chair, her face drained of all color. "This can't be. Leah doesn't, she couldn't be." "Oh, but I said the words, slicing through the stillness. "And as of today, Morgan Ridge officially holds a majority stake." I looked at Carla, whose expression was a war zone, shocked, pale, desperate. Her lips moved, without sound, a silent plea. "All those times," I said softly but firmly. "All those times you diminished me, dismissed me, acted like I was nothing more than a shadow to your spotlight." David pushed forward, his voice trembling. "Leah, why didn't you tell me?" I held his gaze, not unkind, but unyielding. "Would it have changed anything?" I asked. "Would you have defended me if you thought I was rich because you didn't when you thought I wasn't?" He faltered. I turned away. James Whitestone cleared his throat with a soft gravity that drew every eye toward him. "Well," he began, his voice composed, yet unmistakably buoyant, "since we seem to have assembled quite the attentive audience, perhaps it's time to make it official. Morgan Ridge Ventures assumes leadership over Whitestone and Beck effective immediately." Gladly, I replied, my voice clear, the syllables carrying across the marble in silence. Then slowly and deliberately, I turned toward Carla, who stood rooted like a broken statue. "I believe you prepared a speech," I said, a polite smile resting on my lips like a blade she hadn't seen coming. "Would you still like to deliver it, or shall I?" She faltered, her poise unraveling in a tremble that rippled through her silk gown. Without another word, she spun and fled the room, heels clicking across the floor like the tail end of a confession. A moment later, Rose, my mother, drifted after her, ghost-like, as though tethered to her daughter's shame. I lifted a champagne flute from a tray and lightly tapped it with a silver spoon. The crisp chime sliced through the hush. Ladies and gentlemen, I announced, stepping forward into the soft glow of a chandelier, if I might have your attention. A slow current of turning heads followed my words, but it wasn't their gaze I cared about. It was the invisible ripple, the tidal wave just forming the shock that would soon engulf my family, and everything they thought they understood about me. Somewhere near the bar, David lingered, looking disoriented, as if the world he knew had been peeled back to reveal something vast and unfamiliar. Rose was gone, no doubt chasing after Carla's fury. But Henry, my father, quiet, contemplative, often more observer than participant, stood alone by the cocktail station. His glass was empty, but he stared into it like it held answers. Later, as the formalities began to wind down, James pulled me aside with a conspiratorial grin. Well, he said, eyes still gleaming with the thrill of the spectacle, that's one of the most entertaining leadership transitions I've ever seen. Then, more curious, he asked, "But tell me why let them think you were just a baker for so long?" I sipped my champagne and let the silence settle for a heartbeat. "Because people show you who they are when they believe you're beneath them," I said simply. He nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "Their loss, then. Our gain." He raised his glass. "To working with you properly this time." By then, the air was beginning to cool, and the crowd thinned into discreet clusters of executives, exchanging cautious congratulations and whispered astonishment. And into that quieter space, Carla returned. Her makeup had been hastily redone, the edges blurred with resentment. Her composure was patched together, fragile, like cracked porcelain glued just enough to hold. She walked with the determined fury of someone who felt their dignity slipping away. "You humiliated me," she spat, her voice a venomous whisper, trembling with restrained rage. "In front of every contact I've worked years to cultivate." "No, Carla," I replied, my tone even. "You did that to yourself. I just didn't intervene." "I'll resign," she snapped, lifting her chin as if defiance might grant her control. "I won't work for you." "That's your choice," I said, folding no emotion into the statement. "But before you storm off to preserve your pride, you should understand what happened tonight is already echoing through every major firm in the city. Your remarks, your dismissals, your condescension directed at your own CEO won't vanish quietly." Her shoulders slumped ever so slightly. The facade was cracking. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to grow," I said. "Starting Monday, you'll be joining our community outreach initiative. We're launching a support program for small businesses and restaurants, bringing them better access to financial tools and infrastructure." Her eyes widened. "Reporting to who?" "To my mother," I said. "She's still running the bakery, not out of desperation, by choice. She'll be leading the program." Carla's mouth opened, ready to argue, but no words came. Just then Rose reappeared behind her, her face stiff and unreadable. "Leah," she said, her voice thin and brittle, "surely we can talk about this privately. We're family, after all." I turned to face her completely. "Family," I echoed. "For 3 years, you placed me with the staff, cropped me out of photos, and referred to me like I was your charity project. Tell me, at what point did I qualify as family again?" Rose flinched. "We didn't know that you had money." "That's the point," I said. "You assumed I didn't deserve respect because you thought I was poor." Then, unexpectedly, my father set down his glass with a soft but resolute thud. His voice when he spoke was low, but carried weight. "She's right, Rose." Every face in the room turned toward him. "We've failed her. I watched it happen. I stayed silent as our values, ones we taught her, curdled into arrogance and shame. Maybe it took this to show us who we've become." And for the first time in years, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not just regret, but awakening. David stepped forward. The room had mostly cleared, leaving behind only family and the debris of pretense. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice no louder than a breath. "I wanted to," I said, pain curling behind my ribs. "So many times. But every time you let your family mock me, I realized something. If you couldn't respect me as a baker, then you didn't deserve to know me as a CEO." "I love you," he whispered, desperation cracking his tone. I looked at him, still and unmoved. "Love without respect isn't love that lasts. You didn't protect me when it mattered. That tells me everything." "I can change," he said, "now that I understand." I cut him off gently but firmly. "Now that you understand I'm rich, that's not growth, David. That's adaptation." I slipped my wedding ring from my finger, its band cool against my skin, and placed it carefully on the marble table. "I filed for divorce last week. You'll hear from my attorney." His lips parted, but no sound came. I turned back to Carla. "I'll be addressing the board of Whitestone and Beck tomorrow," I said. "As for you, you start at the bakery Monday. My mother doesn't tolerate lateness." Then I faced Rose. "The estate looks lovely tonight. You should enjoy it while you can." Her brows drew together. "What do you mean?" The bank approved my bid this morning, I said quietly. This property now belongs to the Morgan Foundation for Advancement. It'll serve as our nonprofit headquarters for training and uplifting Florida's service workers. Their faces contorted in disbelief, an echo of every moment they ever discounted me returned like thunder. But I didn't stay to watch it land. Outside, the breeze brushed against my skin like a blessing. My phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Come to the bakery. Dinner's waiting. I made your favorite. A slow smile tugged at the corners of my mouth. Be there in 20. 20 minutes later, I was back where it had all begun, sitting at the kitchen counter of Morgan's Hearth, breaking bread empanadas to be exact, and laughing with the man who had once taught me that sugar meant nothing without yeast. Some folks, my mother said, shaking her head, need lessons carved in stone. Success without humility, my father added, is like sugar without yeast. Looks sweet but never rises. As I wiped down counters, the same counters I had once stood on tiptoe to reach, I reflected on the little girl who had once counted coins behind the register, now responsible for managing capital in the billions. But true wealth, that was never the billions. It was this respect integrity and the unshakable courage to define my own worth. If my story stirred something in you, if you've ever felt silenced, sidelined, or underestimated, I'd love to hear your truth. Share your journey in the comments below, and let's create a space where quiet strength isn't just respected, it's celebrated. And if you believe, as I do, that character should outweigh status, that power should walk hand in hand with humility, then I invite you to stay connected. I built this empire one quiet, determined brick at a time, starting with nothing more than the belief that I was already enough. If this message resonates with you, tap the like button, subscribe, and be part of a community where resilience, dignity, and self-worth take center stage. And to you, keep building, especially when no one's watching, because that's when the foundation is born, the unseen part of the glacier that holds everything else above water.